As fun as it is getting ready for week one fantasy football, I can already tell you right now that week one is easily the hardest week to rank fantasy football defenses because nobody really knows how any team is going to look in week one. But that being said, we're going through the top 12 defense rankings for week one fantasy football. Just make sure to go down there, drop a like on this video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support because I am doing everything I can to get us ready for week one fantasy football. Now, getting into our first tier right here, I've got the Denver Broncos this week. They are playing the Tennessee Titans at home. Now, with Denver, there's several reasons I like them the best this week, right? Number one is Denver's defense is great. They already were great last year. They led the league in sacks, and those are big points in fantasy football. Always keep in mind that we're trying to get sacks, we're trying to get interceptions, we're trying to get those big boom plays, those splash plays to give us more fantasy points. And number two, they added more guys on that defense, man. They got two guys from San Francisco I particularly really like. Talanoa Ufunga at safety and Drake Greenlaw at the linebacker position. This should give them more turnover upside and just a more solid squad in general. And number three, I think it's a really tough spot for Cam Ward this week. Cam Ward is already a guy I don't particularly think will be that good in 2025, and I think this is possibly the toughest opener of any team this year. Cam Ward going to Denver for his first game, I think is brutal for Cam Ward. So I think that they completely get annihilated by the Denver Broncos. Denver gets a couple turnovers off Cam Ward. I've got Denver easy at number one. And at number two, I've got the Cardinals defense also very easy because they are taking on the New Orleans Saints. Now, this is a public service announcement right here. The Cardinals defense is a byproduct of this Saints matchup. Any team that plays the Saints, I can imagine that they will be at least top 10 or top 5 throughout the duration of the season. Now, the Cardinals defense is a defense I also like. I have discussed them this year being a good defense in fantasy because I think that they will get more sacks, more turnovers this year. They went all defense in the draft. They've got a defense-first head coach. I think that they have a young enough defense to where they take another leap this year in 2025, and they get off to a really good fantasy start in week one fantasy football versus the New Orleans Saints. And I will say this, guys, the Arizona Cardinals, their first month is a pretty good schedule. They get the Carolina Panthers next week, the 49ers in week 3, and the Seahawks in week 4. I believe that they will be a top 10 to 12 defense all of those weeks. They also play Tennessee in week 5. And what you could do is if you don't already have the Cardinals defense, but you want them particularly for that week 5 matchup versus Tennessee, you've never been able to do this before, but with our automated waiver wire tool, you can schedule out a pickup for the Cardinals defense right now for week 5 fantasy football. You can either get it a week early or the day before the matchup, but you can schedule out this defensive pickup with our automated waiver wire tool. You have no idea the value this is bringing to your fantasy team because it's never been brought to the space before. That's on FS Roundup. And in addition, you can get my full top 200 rankings for week 1 on fsroundup.com as well. But that is secondary because the last thing you want to do is end up not using that waiver wire tool and looking like a guy like this.
This is Ted. Look at him. Ted desperately needs to pick up a new running back, or his fantasy team is toast. For the 3rd year in a row. And losing his season again means one thing.
Oh, no.
Don't be Ted. Use Fantasy Football Roundup to automate your waiver pickups and rest easy this season. Huh. Look at him.
Now, dropping down to our next tier, I've got the Patriots defense at number 3. They're taking on the Las Vegas Raiders this week. Now, they could have been in tier 1 realistically. I did kind of debate doing that, but the reason I ended up not doing that is because I think the Raiders will be better this year with Pete Carroll at head coach. I do think they take a step up as an offense, clean up maybe some turnovers, but that being said, the Patriots defense is a defense I really like this year. They've got Mike Vrabel as that defensive coordinator / head coach. coach. I think Vrabel is a top-tier coach in this league, and I think he cleans up the Patriots right away. And the Raiders, I will say, while I do think they will be cleaned up, I don't think they have enough talent, number one, to be a high-scoring offense in week one. And number two, I do still think that you factor in Geno Smith and the amount of turnovers he had last year, they could get some turnovers in this game. So I've got the Patriots defense easy at number 3 and the Eagles defense at 4 versus the Dallas Cowboys. The home opener on Thursday night is going to be a good one for the Eagles. I think they'll crush Dallas, but the one thing that you have to keep in mind here with the Eagles is actually two things. Number one, Dallas will be playing from behind. So I would imagine that at the very least, they're going to get a garbage time touchdown or two because they're going to be getting crushed by the Eagles. That being said, I do think that the Eagles will force turnovers off of Dak Prescott because they have a weaker offensive line this year with some injuries already banged up, and they're also just an elite defense in general. But the other thing to keep in mind here with the Eagles, and I've said this all offseason much to people's chagrin, there needs to be a distinction that is made between great NFL defenses and great fantasy football defenses. We need those splash plays, and I do think they'll get them this week versus the Cowboys, but I also think they will give up some points due to garbage time touchdowns. The Steelers at 5 and the Jets at 6, and they're taking on each other in New York this week. Now, with the Steelers, I think they'll end up winning this game. That's the only reason they're a spot over the Jets, because I do think that when you look at the Jets offense, I have trouble seeing them move the ball too much in any week, but I do think that this week the Steelers will come out ready to play. The Steelers typically do start pretty well in week one. Unless they're actually playing a good team, then they won't start very good. But the thing about the Steelers is they always get turnovers. They always get the big plays here. And with Justin Fields, they know this guy very, very well. The Steelers did have Justin Fields on their roster last year. They know this guy's ticks, so I do think they will have an edge up over the Jets. But that being said, the Jets are taking on a team that they know the quarterback there as well. Aaron Rodgers being with the Jets gives them an edge as well. And the Jets already do have a good defense with a good defensive coach with Aaron Glenn now there in New York. So I do think that this is just in general a low-scoring matchup. Turnovers potentially on both sides, but I would say the turnovers probably favor the Steelers here in week one. Now, dropping down to our next tier, I've got the Seahawks defense at number 7 and the 49ers at 8. And again, they're playing each other in Seattle. Now, I have said this all offseason as well. The thing with NFC West teams is if you look at a lot of the NFC West matchups last year, they were very low scoring. Well, there's a couple reasons for it. One is divisional games are always very tricky to determine when it comes to fantasy football. A lot of times they're really low scoring, sometimes they're really high scoring. Divisional games are always the weird ones to watch out for in fantasy football. And the other reason I think is because these defenses in the NFC West are really, really strong. So I do think the Seahawks defense is better and more talented than the 49ers. And I also factor in that the 49ers, they don't have anything. They have nothing at the wide receiver position aside from Ricky Pearsall right now. Maybe Juwan Jennings plays, I don't know. But they have nothing else aside from Ricky. They've got George Kittle, and they've got McCaffrey. Now, that's a strong group right there, so they're not much higher. The Seahawks defense, I think, probably gets a turnover or two in this game. While the 49ers as well, they don't have exactly the greatest offense they're taking on either. I think the Seahawks offense probably gets out to a slower start this year because Sam Darnold is taking on a very tough opponent with the 49ers defense. They have Robert Saleh back as that defensive coordinator. I expect him to get off to a really hot start because they have an alpha in the building now, and Nick Bosa actually said it himself. So another low-scoring matchup, I think, is where we're going to find these two teams at. The Chiefs defense at 9 to round out this tier, and they're taking on the Chargers in Brazil. First of all, I hate these Brazil games. I think they're so stupid to go play in Brazil. On Friday night, they're all playing in Brazil. So I don't think either team comes out firing on all cylinders here. Now, the Chiefs' defense has been a mixed bag over the couple years in fantasy football because some games they do get turnovers, and a lot of times they're just a shutdown good NFL defense, but very similar to the Eagles, that's not great in fantasy football. Now, the one advantage I think they'll have in this matchup is they're a really well-disciplined team, and they are coming into a situation where The Chargers left tackle position, yes, Joe Alt moved over there, but I do still see pass rush being a problem for the Chargers early in the season as they work out some kinks. So I think this could be a sack-heavy game, but they may struggle to get a turnover versus a disciplined Chargers offense. And then dropping down to our next tier, I've got the Chargers at number 10 as well in that same matchup. Because I also think, as I said for the Chiefs, the Chargers will be in a position to where they could take advantage of weaknesses as well. Obviously, the Chiefs don't have Rashee Rice to start out the year. They've got an old Travis Kelce who doesn't even think he's focused on football at this point. Xavier Worthy, a lot rides on him, right? So I think that it's going to look very similar to how we saw the Chiefs last year post Rashee Rice, and it's a lower scoring matchup. But again, that being said, I do think that the Chargers will struggle to get turnovers in this game. So they're here because I think it's a lower scoring matchup, and I do think there's weaknesses that they can kind of push into, but I think they also struggle to get the big turnover plays and the big splash plays for good fantasy production. At number 11, I've got the Bears this week versus the Minnesota Vikings. This is, I guess, my hot take of Week 1 fantasy football. I like the Bears in this matchup. I think it's a very tough spot for J.J. McCarthy this week. It is a Monday night game in Chicago. All eyes are on J.J. McCarthy, who has never played a real NFL snap before. And I was discussing the problem with Cam Ward's matchup in Denver this week. Well, I feel the same way about J.J. McCarthy this week in Chicago. This is a tough spot for him, man. So I see issues with J.J. Either he's going to turn the ball over or just not look as sharp as he will in future weeks. I think the Bears do well enough here to have a top 12 week. And honestly, this might be a little bit low as I talk myself into it more and more. The Bears defense is stacked. Every positional group, there's a stud there. They're getting sacks. They're getting turnovers on the back end. I think they come out ready to go in Week 1. So I guess you could call this my hot take of Week 1 fantasy football. And the Bengals defense at number 12 to round us out. This actually might be my hot take because the Bengals defense is atrocious, guys. This is probably the riskiest defensive play you can make, even though they're playing the Cleveland Browns. But there's several things to keep in mind here. Number one, the Bengals defense is horrific. Everybody should understand that at this point. Number two, going to Cleveland in Week 1, not exactly a recipe for success like many people would think. This is a divisional matchup, number one. Typically low scoring in the AFC North. And number two, the Bengals always start out slow. They lost to the Patriots last year in Week 1. So you have to keep that in mind. But that being said, I think Cleveland's offense is so depleted of so much talent. I do still think that the Bengals could be a top 12 defense this week. And I just like them better than the other options that are behind them. So let me know what you think of the defense rankings this week. And if you want to see the top 30 wide receivers for Week 1 fantasy football, click on this video right here.